Well then, let's delve into this week's postbag.
Hello and welcome to this special programme commemorating the centenary of the Battle of the Somme. Over the next 3 hours we'll be looking at aspects of the battle and at life in the West Midlands during June and July of 1916.
We're based here at the Upper Cloister at the Oratory Church in Birmingham at the special centenary exhibition for the Somme.
It was opened by the Lord Mayor of Birmingham, Councillor Carl Rice, who just so happens to be one of the Ladywood councillors as well. He then met youngsters from Ladywood's TNT News.
Today we're remembering and honouring the men and women of the past. And yesterday I was at the National Arboretum, Memorial Arboretum, and the chaplain who was in the service said that the armed services are an extension of the democratically elected governments of this country. They're not freestanding, they don't do things off their own bat. So the armed forces are an expression of our determination to fight for freedom, democracy, and all those things that, you know, make it great to be living in the UK. So I'm very, very pleased that we're here today, particularly not just to commemorate all those who fell in the First World War and the Battle of the Somme, but particularly this section here, which illustrates those men from Ladywood who died in July 1916.
What have you thought about this exhibition?
It is absolutely fantastic. I mean, just looking at the exhibition over there about the men from Ladywood who were killed in action on the Battle of the Somme, and looking at the memorabilia, looking at the work that's been put into looking at individual streets and the contribution people from those streets made to the First World War effort, and looking at your exhibition of your school was particularly pleasing for me to see that you youngsters are learning about the contribution that people before you have made to making this country free, and we're able to enjoy democracy. No, what I like about it is that local perspective. Yes, you know, in other museums there'll be bigger and grander things, but the great thing about this exhibition is that it focuses on local people, and just looking at what people have collected over the years and they've loaned to this exhibition. I would love to have seen this in the main museum in Birmingham, but it is absolutely fantastic, and hats off to all those people who have helped make it what it is.
Now, right now, the Lord Mayor is in Albert, a town on the Somme, and it's got strong links with Birmingham, and we'll be finding out more about that later in the programme. And we'll also be dipping into the exhibition and finding out about some of these fantastic displays here, and talking to some of the visitors and some of the people that made the display. But for now, something a little bit different. We're going to present a number of short news bulletins, as those that were from this week in 1916. Now, obviously there's no such thing as TV, or there wasn't a century ago, but if there was, we imagine the news on Big Centre would have started like this.
You're watching Big News covering the counties of Staffordshire, Warwickshire and Worcestershire on this, the 27th of June 1916. First tonight, it's been revealed that of the 40 people who were injured in yesterday's tram crash, 4 are being detained in hospital. The tram travelling from Darlaston to Birmingham overturned on Soho Road in Handsworth. The 4 people detained were travelling on the top of the tram at the time of the accident. All available police from the nearby Thornhill Road police station rushed to the scene, and every assistance was accorded the injured passengers. Many of them were compelled to scramble out from among the wreckage through broken windows. Scores of passengers were badly cut by broken glass. There is no suggestion that the tram was being driven by an inexperienced, newly qualified driver, and an investigation is underway into the cause of the accident. And now the war news. General Haig has reported successes at 10 locations, and there have been many British raids on German lines. There has been a big French artillery attack in the Champagne region. General Haig has stated, "We carried out a number of successful enterprises last night at different points on the front. The hostile lines were penetrated at 10 different places. Our parties inflicted considerable casualties on the enemy and took several prisoners. Our casualties were everywhere very slight." 4 large explosions were caused by our heavy artillery in the enemy's reward lines near Pozieres. And in the last few minutes, we've received news that another hostile kite balloon was destroyed by our aircraft yesterday. And now to the rest of the news. Henry Alexander of Church Street in West Smithick has appeared in court charged with administering arsenic to 3 persons, namely his mother, sister and lodger. He was remanded in custody. The latest health returns for Birmingham show that last week the cases of measles fell to 277. In the city hospitals there were 212 patients in the scarlet fever wards and 83 in the diphtheria ward. The Evening Schools Subcommittee of the Birmingham Education Committee reports that for the period ended the 29th of May, 1,829 students entered the munition classes at 3 centres. Of the total number of students, 137 were women, of whom 100 qualified and 98 were placed in works. And finally, for those who wish to spend any leisure time you may have, why not visit the Smithick Theatre Royal? Our entertainment correspondent says the management of the theatre have shown considerable enterprise in the matter of the summer programme, which began last night. The play for the week is Mr. Walter Melville's detective story, The Female Swindler. Enjoy your evening, and from all of us on Big News, good night and thanks for watching. You're watching Big News, covering the 3 counties of Staffordshire, Warwickshire and Worcestershire. It's the 28th of June 1916. A Handsworth man has been awarded the Military Cross for what's been described as an exhibition of skill and courage nothing better has been seen in the Flying Corps in France. Second Lieutenant Forbes from the 6th Battalion Royal Warwickshire Regiment, who's attached to the RFC, was an acting observer when he was attacked by 2 enemy aeroplanes and was wounded in the chest. On recovering from the shock, he saw that his pilot was dead and climbed into his seat and succeeded in bringing his machine from behind enemy lines to land safety. At a Perry Bar military tribunal held today, 25 people applied for exemption from the army. They were mainly farmers who said they were experiencing considerable difficulty in carrying on the work on the farms owing to the scarcity of labour, and who appealed on behalf of their sons and labourers. In one case, where man was the only one left on the farm, exemption was granted for 3 months. Temporary exemption for 6 months was given to the son of an agricultural blacksmith, and conditional exemption to a shoeing wheelwright. Mr. E.C.R. Marks, chairman of the Birmingham Insurance Committee, has revealed that a complaint against a medical man has been made. He stated the doctor admitted losing his temper and using bad language to an injured person. He added it was only fair to the medical man concerned to say that the language complained of was not any more stronger than frequently heard on the golf course. They felt, however, that it was the most improper use of language in a surgery. The Lord Mayor, Alderman Neville Chamberlain, presented the trophies at the Birmingham and District Secondary School Sports Evening. The Championship Shield was won by the George Dixon School, and the Five Ways King Edward School were the runners-up. Now to the international situation, and the latest British communique indicates that on the British front in France, patrols are making things lively for the enemy. Southeast of the Ypres salient, a German attack has been repulsed. Several successes in the air were also reported. Numerous hostile aircraft were encountered on the enemy's side of the line. 5 of our machines engaged 4 Fokkers, 2 of which were brought down and fell out of control. 2 more of the enemy's machines were driven down in the course of the day. One of our planes was shot down in an aerial duel near Arras, and the occupants are thought to have been taken prisoner. And the Daily Mirror reports there have been successful enterprises which resulted in hostile lines being penetrated in no fewer than 10 different places. This has led to speculation that a big push is imminent. And on that news, we end this edition of Big News.
Now after the break, we'll have some more real news stories from June 1916 as we build up to the day the Battle of the Somme began. You're watching Somme 100, our countdown on Big Centre TV to the day the Battle of the Somme began. Now between now and 8 o'clock we'll be counting down, as we say, to the day the battle begun, with bulletins from this week in what became one of the most amazing weeks in the country's history.
You're watching Big News, bringing you news from across the counties of Staffordshire, Warwickshire and Worcestershire on the 29th of June 1916. First, some extremely good news. Mr. and Mrs. Potter of Wellington Road in Dudley, who early this year received news that their son, Corporal Nelson Potter, of being killed in action against the Turks on Easter Sunday and received a message of sympathy from the King, have now received a letter from their son saying he's been captured by the Turks and is unwounded. Arrangements are being made this week to enable children who have the misfortune to lose their fathers to the war to have a fortnight's holiday in the country. The necessary funds have been raised by subscribers to local newspapers. Children will be boarded at various homes. Many of the children will have had no experience of country life, and the fortnight's holiday will give them the freedom to enjoy the fields, and it is hoped it'll be a joyous occasion. Last year, about 300 children benefited from the scheme, but the sad toll of war has been heavy this year, and it is anticipated this year the total will be close to 1,000. The Birmingham Lady Mayoress's Depot has issued reassuring news that, contrary to fears, there is no need for concern that parcels sent to prisoners in Germany are being tampered with. The latest official list of casualties issued last night contained the names of officers, 10 dead and 24 wounded or missing, and 1,657 non-commissioned officers, of whom 297 are dead. Fatalities include Corporal Chester Homer of the Royal Warwickshire Regiment, who was the 21-year-old son of Handsworth councillor Mr. Homer. Fellow Handsworth residents, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor of Grode Lane, have received the sad news that their son, Private W. Taylor of the Motor Transport Section, has died of sunstroke while serving in India. Acting Bombardier W.J. Josephs of the RGA has been awarded the Military Medal and also the Russian Cross of St. George for conspicuous bravery in rescuing wounded comrades. He hails from Francis Road, Kings Norton, and his father and 4 brothers are with the colours. The Birmingham Patriotic Horticultural Show has been arranged for November in the Town Hall. All local allotment holders are asked to assist with exhibits, which will be sold by auction to help the war funds. And on to the situation on the Western Front, and there are conflicting reports, with the official French communique suggesting lively artillery preparation at various points along the front, but this has not been acknowledged in the official British communique. Our reporter at Hague's headquarters in Montreal reports increased activity, but little information is forthcoming, leading to continued speculation that a big push is imminent. And that's all we have time for now. It's the 30th of June 1916 and you're watching Big News covering Staffordshire, Warwickshire and Worcestershire. An inquest has been held into the death of 2 workers who were killed in a grenade explosion at a factory in Bournebrook. The inquest was told that Frederick Plimmer had placed a hand grenade in a vice which had a Bunsen burner fully alight just beneath it. An explosion occurred and a witness was flung against the wall by the force. A director of the company said he thought the deceased was experimenting with the effect that heat had on the propeller. A verdict of misadventure was recorded. It's been reported that Sergeant John Goff of the King's Rifle Regiment, who has assisted Aston Villa, has been wounded in action and is in hospital in London. He is the 6th son of Mrs. Goff of Thomas Street in Aston. 4 of them are serving with the forces and 1 is a prisoner of war. The war has taken a heavy toll on a family named Cook from Wharf Street in Hockley. There were 7 brothers, 6 of whom joined the army and 1 the navy. The latter died of natural causes, 3 have been killed in active service, the eldest has been wounded and discharged, and now comes news that Private Charles Cook, who was reported to be missing near Ypres nearly 2 years ago, is now officially stated to be killed. The youngest brother is on active service somewhere in France. The Edgbaston branch of the British Women's Temperance Association held a meeting yesterday at the Botanical Gardens, during which they were presented with a banner for attracting the most new members this year. The advances of 3.5% of the wages of miners in the South Staffordshire and East Worcestershire districts, which has just been granted, brings them to a record figure in the history of the trade. It represents 3d a day for pikemen, whose wages now exceed 9 shillings a day, an advance of nearly 100% since 1888. Meanwhile, the sergeants and constables of Warwickshire County Police have submitted a pay request. And at present, constables start at 25 shillings and 11 pence a week, rising to 30 shillings and 11 pence. June has not been a very favourable month for crops in the Vale of Evesham. It's been unusually cold and gloomy with very little sunshine. Rain in the last week has benefited most crops, but farmers are getting anxious. There's also a shortage of labour, although women are giving useful assistance. And now the international situation. There have been numerous unconfirmed reports of sporadic attacks and sound of heavy bombardment in the Western Front along the Somme Valley, and we still do not know if this is the start of the long anticipated big push. We'll bring you more news on that as we get it. In the meantime, that's all the news for now.
Now to the day that the battle began, the 1st of July 1916, and here's what the people of the West Midlands could have heard had they been watching Big Centre TV.
It's the first day of July 1916 and you're watching Big News, bringing you news and features from our 3 counties of Staffordshire, Warwickshire and Worcestershire. We begin with the tremendous news that the great push which we've been waiting for has at last begun. The attack began at 7:30 this morning and was preceded for half an hour by an artillery preparation, the violence of which hasn't yet been equalled. Our correspondent at the front told us in the last few minutes that from the first results of the day's activity, I think we can await developments with confidence. We'll obviously bring you more news on that situation as we get it. Meanwhile, 3 Belgian munition workers were each sent down for a month's imprisonment at Birmingham Police Court for assaulting women whilst drunk in an incident which occurred in Bristol Street last night. The Worcester branch of the RSPCA says that since the care of horses in the services has been taken over by the Society, 70 out of every 100 wounded are able to return fit for service. Around 1 million horses are working for us in the war. One unnamed local lady has donated 5 miles of bandages. At Wednesbury, a farmer from Wellington appeared in court charged with selling milk with added water. However, analysis of the cows found the milk to be in the same condition as when it left them. The stipendiary stated it seemed to be the cow's fault and he couldn't find them, and the case was dismissed. Information's been received about the death in action of Private B. Young, Canadian Light Infantry, formerly a resident of Halesowen. Samuel Barnett, a member of the Rowley Regis Urban Council, has received information that his son Arthur, who was serving with the Australian contingent, has been killed in action. And some bad news to report from Lichfield. Philip Barker of the cruiser Black Prince, son of the overseer at the Lichfield Post Office, and Cecil George Smith, a first-class stoker of HMS Tipperary of George Lane, are reported to have lost their lives in the recent naval battle off the coast of Jutland. And as we leave you, we're hearing the latest official communique states a cautious and systematic offensive continues on the Western Front. We understand from our correspondent that a huge crater has been gouged out by an explosion. It occurred at Hawthorne Ridge, which is, if my geography is correct, I think is near Beaumont Hamel, not too far from the delightful town of Albert. So, with news that the major British offensive is underway, let us rejoice in that news and let us pray for a speedy and successful campaign on the Somme. On this, a most momentous day in British history, we bid you goodbye, and our thoughts are with you and your loved ones as they fight for our freedom across the world.
Now after the break we'll be having a half-hour edition of the Big Magazine programme as it may have looked in 1916. And then we'll be assessing the success or otherwise of the Battle of the Somme with the help of Professor Stephen Badsey. He's the Professor of Conflict Studies at Wolverhampton University.